Pledge of Allegiance, and Donnie Command will lead us in the prayer. If you would stand, please.
We're going to do the pledge first? No.
Prayer first.
Okay. Father God, we thank Thee for this day. Lord, we thank Thee for this time together. We thank Thee for those rights, Lord. We thank Thee for watching over us, for keeping us safe, Lord, as we travel. And Lord, we ask that You be with us. Be with us and guide us as the things that we're listening to and the things that are being presented to us, Lord, that we take them in and use them the way that You'd have us to use, Lord. We ask that You be with those men and women that are protecting our country, whether they're local, whether they're in harm's way in other countries, Lord. Be with them and be with their families. And Lord, please guide those that are supposed to be in charge of us, Lord. Those that are supposed to be using their head. We ask that You touch their hearts and have them to do that, Lord. Be with us and guide us always. Help us to shine Your light for others to see. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Seated. Get comfortable. Grab a hold of the seat. Don. Oh, yeah. I ask that you turn off your cell phones. I see a few people here that I don't recognize, so I'm assuming that they may be new to High Noon. So let me explain just a little bit about High Noon. High Noon is a public discussion group, hopefully discussing the current affairs that we deal with here in Oklahoma on a daily basis. The legislation, the leadership, the politics of our society or of our community. All it takes to be a member is to come the second time and join us. That makes you a full-fledged member, entitled to all of the rank and privileges that all the rest of us have got. With that, I'm glad to see a good turnout we've got here today. I want to, well, do we have any guests? Is there anybody here that hasn't been here before? Okay, there's one. Would you all mind sharing with us who you are and where you're from?
Okay, my name's Carol Patel. I'm from about an hour and 20 minutes east of Dallas. And I've been working with the United States Human Defense League. We formed that a couple years ago, and it's a grassroots organization. We're going after the politicians, the sheriffs, the law enforcement, the judges, and exposing them. That's what I do. There's a lot of people who don't like me very well, but that's okay. You know, I just got back a couple weeks ago from Oregon and literally chased down an animal control guy and said, "You're impersonating an officer. You're filing papers in court that says you're an arresting officer and you have no law enforcement license, training, or anything else. Can you explain why? Because the taxpayers want to know." And he hit his truck and took off. I mean, it was funny, but yeah, that's what we do. So.
Good for you.
Yeah.
My name is Mitch. I live here in Oklahoma City. Grew up here in Oklahoma City. Been coming to H&H since it was a little two-lane range out on 10th and Council Road. And so I thought I'd take the opportunity to come in and listen to you guys.
Great. Welcome.
My name is Mark Yates. I live in Edmond and go to church with Miles Hall. And just thought I'd come hear more about the presentation today about Wright Farm and know, more about it. So,
welcome. Glad to have you. Are there any announcements that need to be made that if you all know of events that are coming up that we might be interested in, if you would share those events with us, and this is a public affairs concern, and so we're interested in meetings that we can attend to learn more about what we need to know to be good citizens and good voters in America. Are there any other announcements? You've got one, Glenn?
Don, could I just suggest that the Reclaim Conference is coming up at the end of this month? Could we get Jim to send that flyer out?
I'm sorry. Cannot.
Well, I know we haven't been sitting them out. I'm wondering if the group can request.
No, I'm sorry, cannot do that.
Very good.
Well, go ahead and finish your announcement.
Well, I was just wondering, because this is an organization that we're all involved with, and wondering if the group could request that it be sent out, the flyer be sent out, promoting that conference.
Well, evidently not. But I'll go ahead and fill that in if you want to. It's reclaiming America, reclaiming Oklahoma City, reclaiming Edmond for Christ. It will be held Friday, July the 22nd, from 6 to 10 p.m. and July the 23rd from 9 o'clock to 1 p.m. That's Friday and Saturday at the First Baptist Church in Utah. I mean, in Edmond. Y'all are welcome, and
Friday the 33rd.
anyway, we can get a little bit more of a word from our sources. That's an excellent place to get them. Are there any other announcements that you all know of that you'd like to share with the group? Okay, well, that's the extent of my involvement. I need to, we're being asked to consider state legislation that affects all of us, directly and indirectly. And I'm assuming that most of the people that are here today only are concerned primarily with one position or one side. And so let me go up front acknowledge that this is not going to be a fair discussion, because we're not hearing from what I'm assuming to be the other side. But we've got some of the best sources for I think it's opposition side to that legislation, and we've got a number of other people that are aware of it. So at this point, with those introductions and that explanation, I'd like to turn it over to B.L. Cozad. He'll tell us what his background is, where he came from, what he's concerned with about this legislation. And I've already told him that he could have an hour and 15 minutes, but we want at least 15 minutes and maybe more at the end to bounce questions off of him. So with that explanation, let me call B.L. Cozad to the stand and let him have it.
Thank you. Okay, Don's told me an hour and 15 minutes. Usually this presentation is about an hour and 30 minutes long. So I cut a couple of slides out of it, and we're going to hold any and all questions. There are 3x5 cards on the tables. There are pencils on the tables. If you have any questions, please write them down, make notes. And at the end of the presentation is when we'll ask them, because I'm going to be going through a lot of information. I'm going to be going through it pretty quick. Okay. My name is B.L. Cozad. I'm a gamecock farmer here in Oklahoma, retired military. I'm a single parent. My daughter is over here today. You'll see her around. For 13 years now, since 2002, when the legislature passed the law against the gamecock industries, I started investigating the Humane Society and what's going on. I am a licensed private investigator. Okay, this is what I do. I study how the connections with all of this is being used to violate our rights. America is founded as a constitutional republic, and we need to remember that. Okay, our founders founded America not on a religion, but they founded it on the teachings of Jesus Christ. Judge not lest you be judged. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. All of these concepts of the Bible are, if you really understand the Constitution, those are embedded throughout our Constitution and the founding principles of America. We need to return America to that concept. I believe in the Constitution of the United States. I believe in our freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and our right to bear arms. Most people do not understand the freedom of religion and what actually encompasses the entire aspects of freedom of religion. Everybody thinks it's about just your right to go to church or believe in the religion of your preference. It's not. It's much, much more. Our founding fathers, very brilliant individuals, when they wrote the Constitution of the United States, understand, they prayed long and hard about every sentence and every punctuation mark in that document. Every document, or every punctuation mark. Understand that even a comma can make a difference in the sentence. The sentence that I use to explain this is don't, comma, stop, exclamation, versus don't stop with the comma removed. Don't stop. That's telling you to quit doing an activity. They want you to stop that behavior. Don't stop without the comma means continue doing that activity. So understand that our founding fathers understood that even a simple comma can change the meaning of a sentence 180 degrees. Our legislators up here at the state capitol, they don't even bother reading the bills in a lot of cases. The bills have 800 words or 800 pages, some of them. They don't even take the time to understand the bills that they're voting on. Hidden language is often used inside of legislation to destroy our rights, to actually usurp the meaning of what the legislation says it is meant to promote. They say they're passing legislation to protect our rights, when in reality, the wording that they use is meant to take our rights away from us. And we'll see further of that, more of that in this state question 777. The Bill of Rights. We need to really start educating people on what our Bill of Rights are. Okay? The first 10 amendments of the Constitution are our Bill of Rights. Everybody can usually name the First Amendment and talk about, oh, my freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of... But they don't understand what that actually means. We're going to discuss the Bill of Rights today, and particularly, we're going to discuss how the animal welfare and animal cruelty laws shred your God-given rights, which are enumerated in the Bill of Rights. First Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John Jay, stated, "No power on earth has the right to take our property from us without our consent." Understand that your property is your animals, your land, and everything that you own. He also stated, "The Bible is the best of all books, for it is the Word of God and teaches us the way to be happy in this world and in the next. Continue therefore to read it and to regulate your life by its precepts." Understand, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Judge not, lest you be judged. Those concepts, let he who has not sinned cast the first stone. Those concepts are the foundations of America. Those teachings of Jesus Christ. We need to get back to them and start adhering to them. Providence has given our people the choice of their rulers, and it is a duty as well as a privilege and interest of our Christian nation to select and prefer Christians for their rulers. Founding Father and President John Adams defined a constitutional republic as a government of laws and not of men. Constitutional republics are a deliberate attempt to diminish the perceived threat of majoritarianism. thereby protecting dissenting individuals and minority groups from the tyranny of the majority by placing checks on the power of the majority of the population. Understand there's a big difference between authority and power. Government has power, but the government can only have the authority that we give it. Since an individual cannot lawfully use force against a person, liberty, or property of another individual, then the common force, for the same reason, cannot lawfully be used to destroy the person, liberty, or property of individuals or groups. Frederick Baptiste he wrote a book called The Law. If you haven't read it, then you need to get it and read it. He puts things in such an articulate way that once you read the document, once you read his book, no one can even halfway intelligently attempt to fight against it or argue against his arguments. He explains what the rights of the individual are. Understand that this precept right here, this concept, if I come to your house and try to force you into my opinion, or if I come to your house and try to take your property from you, I don't have the authority to do that. And when I try to do it, you have the authority and you have the power to try to fight against me to keep me from doing that. So when I come to your house and I try to force you into my opinion or try to take your property from you, you have the power to resist me, and you might hurt or kill me or to stop me from doing that. If I get 9 of my friends to come with me to your house to force you into my opinion or to take your rights away from you, now, because there's 10 of us, we might have the power to do that, but we still don't have the authority. And since the government draws its power from we the people, the majority, we the people, the 10 of us, me and my 9 friends, we cannot give the government authority that we ourselves do not possess. The Constitution. Article 6, Section 2 of the United States Constitution is commonly called the Supremacy Clause. The Constitution and the laws of the United States shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. Understand, in pursuance thereof. In other words, laws that are written to protect your rights are in pursuance of the Constitution. Laws that are written to usurp your rights, they're in violation of the Constitution. And any law that is written that is in conflict with the Constitution of the United States cannot withstand. Because either the statute, as it's written by the legislatures, is supreme, or the Constitution is supreme. And Article 6, Section 2 attests to the fact that the Constitution will always be supreme. To legally alter the Constitution for the last 240 years, all amendments and efforts to amend the Constitution have been done by the legislature passing a bill, and then Congress sending the bill out to the states, and three-quarters of the states ratifying the bill. That's the way to amend the Constitution. Now, you also have the Article 5 Convention of the states, and we're not going to get into that today. But this is the way to legally alter the Constitution. Even as much as the Second Amendment is talked about, people don't understand. The Second Amendment has never been amended by the procedures that our founders put into the Constitution. It is still the supreme law of the land. And when they wrote the Constitution 240 years ago, in 1791, they ratified it. Understand that George Washington owned 3 cannons. If it was his right, protected by the Second Amendment of the Constitution 240 years ago, when they wrote the Constitution, and the Second Amendment has never been amended according to the procedures that our founding fathers put into the Constitution to amend it, that's still our rights today. We have the right to, every person in here has the right to own cannons, if they want to. So don't get into the discussion about the the assault weapons or the 30-round magazines. It's all hearsay, it's all garbage. We have the right to own any weapon we want. And even 120 years ago, you can watch your old westerns and attest to the fact that when a person left prison, even if they were in prison for murder, when they left prison, the sheriff gave them their guns back. Because once they had finished their debt to society, as they left the prison, they regained and were re-awarded all of their inherent rights. So even a felon has a right to own a gun and protect their own life and their own liberty and their own property. If they have not amended the Constitution of the United States and they have not amended the Second Amendment according to the procedures of the Constitution, the supreme law of the land is the Second Amendment. All laws in conflict with the Second Amendment are illegal. Now, the First Amendment. Genesis. America is founded on the teachings of Jesus Christ. Remember that. Christian. And in the Bible, I'm a Christian, the Bible, my religious belief, says that God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. The Bill of Rights is included in the Constitution to protect and guarantee the rights of the minority groups and each individual, including Oklahoma's farmers and ranchers. Let me explain to you what free exercise of religion in the First Amendment really is. It includes exercising the dominion that God gave you over the land that you own and over the animals that you own. That is your free exercise of religion. Dominion means unaccountable control and rule. No other man can tell you what you can and cannot do. Animals are property. What are your property rights? Everything that you have ownership of, animals, fish, fowl, your life, your liberty, and your individual pursuit of happiness, all of these things, all of your dreams, even your ideas are your property. Intellectual property rights. Those are your individual concepts that are unique to you. They are a property right that you have full ownership of. Dominion. Dominion means unaccountable control and rule. If you're not infringing on another person's property rights, then you have the God-given constitutionally protected right to use your property any way that it best serves your interest. Now, reducing man to the status of an animal. We're going to discuss and explain to you how giving animals rights actually is not meant to raise animals up. It's meant to reduce man down, to strip God away from you and remove God as a source of your rights. God gave man dominion over the earth, animals, fish, and fowl. The Constitution ensures that all men are created equal and protected in these unalienable rights. The First Amendment of the Constitution protects and guarantees a free exercise of religion. That includes exercising the dominion that God gave each man over the animals and all property that he owns. See, animals are private property. Right here, you'll see this diagram. God is the source of our rights. God created man. God gave man dominion over the animals, earth, fish, and fowl. When you start giving animals rights or environmental protection laws to give the earth rights, what you're doing is you're not elevating the earth or you're not elevating animals. What you're doing is you're reducing the status of man. See, all laws, all constitutional amendments, even international treaties are written in that center tier that you see on the diagram. It's written to protect one man from another man. Because no matter what you write that statute or that law in, it does not apply to God. He's over you. He's over all of us. And it does not apply to the animals or the earth because they don't read the written language and they don't understand. When you give animals rights, what you're doing is you're erasing that line between man and animals. And when you erase that line between man and animals, what you end up with is another man telling you what your rights are. You've removed God as the source of your rights, because now you don't have dominion. Another man has now become your ruler, and he's telling you what your limits of your dominion are. Animal welfare and animal cruelty laws are intentionally meant to completely shred the Bill of Rights. They violate the First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Eighth Amendment, and Ninth Amendments of the United States Constitution. And I'm going to specifically cover how it does that. But they're also used to destroy the Second Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the Seventh Amendment, and the Tenth Amendment. Animal welfare and animal cruelty laws destroy 9 out of the 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights. There are just a usurpation of human rights being used as excuses to commit theft by the government and animal rights organizations under the color of law. It brings about the destruction of private property through emotionally based ideologies. Understand, it's instituting socialism. Oh, we don't like what you're doing, you have to stop. The majority gets to tell you what you can do. And fascism. Well, I don't like it. You have to quit because I don't like it. You're combining socialism and fascism at the same time. And thereby is controlled using communist control mechanisms. If what you're doing with your private property, your animals or your land, if it does not infringe on or damage another person's private property, then it is within your right to use your property in whatever way you personally consider is in your best interest. Animal cruelty and animal welfare laws are not about controlling animals or helping animals. It's about controlling human beings. Laws, Thomas Jefferson said it better than I can. Law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the rights of the individual. Laws are artificial dictates that suppress, subjugate, control, and steal the wealth from the people of a nation. Adolf Hitler was a big animal rights activist. Most people don't know. He used animal rights laws to destroy human rights. He could then justify treating humans like animals, because he made himself the source of the rights of the people in Nazi Germany. He made the government the source of rights. Adolf Hitler used animal welfare and animal cruelty laws to usurp human rights, establishing the government as a source of rights. This enables the Nazi government to consider animals to be, or citizens to be animals. In other words, you became property. And justified the rulers, which is now the government, to euthanize those citizens or animals that the government owners considered culls. That's why they could euthanize 6 million people just as easily as our government could euthanize $6 million of cats. Because the government was now the source of rights. And remember, there is a threat facing America today. And we're going to get into it in just a moment. It's called United Nations Agenda 21. It includes a plan for depopulation, which is reducing the population by 75%. A lot of it's being done on the back of this communist ideologies of animal welfare. As we said, the animal welfare and animal cruelty laws violate the First, Fourth, Fifth, Eighth, and Ninth Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. They also are used to usurp the Second, Seventh, Sixth, Seventh, and 10th Amendments. When the government grants rights to animals, the government then acts as the agent for your animals. Therefore, the government is granting itself the authority to violate your rights. Reagan said this in 1964 with his Time for Choosing speech. He talked about the policies that the government wanted to institute that today is called Agenda 21. And he's talked about it in 1964 before it was ever referred to as Agenda 21.
You'll find that they've also asked for the right to imprison farmers who wouldn't keep books as prescribed by the federal government. The Secretary of Agriculture asked for the right to seize farms through condemnation and resell them to other individuals. And contained in that same program was a provision that would have allowed the federal government to remove 2 million farmers from the soil.
If you live in the heartland of America, you have to listen up. While the nation was distracted with the Anthony Weiner drama, President Obama signed an executive order that will seize greater power over food, fiber, and energy in our vast countryside areas. The president created the White House Rural Council to, quote, make sure we're working across government to strengthen rural communities and promote economic growth. Sounds great, but get this. The council involves a long list of the most powerful people in America. Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner, the Defense Secretary is on it, Attorney General Eric Holder, even the head of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. Why would Homeland Security be involved in exerting power and influence over the heartland? Why would the Defense Department be involved in promoting economic growth? The plan calls for the federal government to control almost every aspect of rural America. It will also, quote, identify and facilitate economic opportunities associated with energy development, outdoor recreation, and other conservation-related activities. Really? When did hunting and fishing become associated with conservation-related activities? And by the way, what does that mean? The aims of the White House Rural Development Plan sound eerily similar to a UN plan called Agenda 21, where a central planning agency would be responsible for oversight into all areas of our lives, a one world order. Sound familiar?
Yes, that's what your animal welfare laws also do. One of the ways that less than 2 years after Ronald Reagan gave that speech in 1964, Congress passed the Animal Welfare Act. Understand, how do you imprison farmers and ranchers? For not keeping books, according to the way that the Congress tells you to, or the state government tells you to. But you also use animal welfare laws, animal cruelty laws. You give animals rights, and then you can imprison the farmers and ranchers for violating the rights of the animals. And the Animal Welfare Act of 1966 was signed into law 2 years after Reagan gave this speech. It gave animals rights. It reduced man's status to the status of an animal. The Fourth Amendment. I think we've thoroughly discussed how the animal cruelty laws violate the First Amendment. They also violate the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment is the right for people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Government intrusions into our homes and even onto our property, using the excuse of protecting animals, is a violation of human rights. Understand, is an animal that you own a justifiable reason to violate your home? You're supposed to be the king of your castle. How can another man come and kick in the door of your castle and tell you that your animals are a priority and they're there to strip you of your rights because the animal is more important? The Fifth Amendment. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service or time of war, public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Understand, what is the supreme law of the land? The U.S. Constitution. Due process of law? They have to abide by the Constitution. If the law is in conflict with the United States Constitution, the law they're trying to enforce cannot withstand. It's therefore illegal. When the government is taking your animals away from you, they're taking away your private property, the property that you own. And if they're taking away your private property, where's their just compensation to pay you for the property they're taking away from you? And where's the public use? We're taking away your animals away from you because we don't like what you're doing with your animals, so therefore your animals mean more than your rights. The environmental and animal protection laws create a legal precedence and an ideology. It is illegal to own and possess your property if you intend to use your property, because the role of the government is to protect your property from you. This is the foundation of communism. Private property taken by the government must serve a justifiable public use. In criminal cases, we've already said, due process of law, life, liberty, and property requires the government to compensate citizens when it takes private property for public use. If they're taking your animals away from you, taking them to an impound, putting them in an impound, selling them at the impound, the non-government organization, the impound, is making money from your property they just stole. And if they take your property down there and kill it, then the state pays that non-government organization to kill you and destroy your private property. They profit from taking it and depriving you of your property. Now, if they're taking your property to go kill it, or taking your property to sell it to somebody else, where is the public use? There is none. They've simply subjugated you and deprived you of your rights because somebody else has determined they're going to take your rights away from you and force communism on you. Now, the Second, Sixth, and Seventh Amendments, I combine this slide here. Understand, your felony laws are meant to strip you of your Second Amendment rights. In a lot of cases, our government is creating and making animal cruelty laws or animal welfare laws. They're making those felonies. When they make those felonies, what they're doing is they're trying to strip you of your Second Amendment rights illegally, using laws that are in conflict with the Constitution of the United States. Intimidation and threats, the Sixth and Seventh Amendment, intimidation and threats are often used to deprive the accused of the Sixth Amendment right to a trial by a jury of peers, by compelling the accused to plead guilty under duress. I've got friends across the United States that have, some of them have went up to 2 years going back and forth to court every month because they were accused of animal cruelty, and they're having to show up at the courtroom every month to get there and have the district attorney say, oh well, he showed up, since he showed up, we're going to ask for another postponement until next month. How many days off of work can you take to show up to a courtroom like that? They do it under duress. They force you to give away your rights. And the Seventh Amendment, state laws never supersede the supreme law of the land, the U.S. Constitution. Thus, the Seventh Amendment right to civil lawsuits against the state for violations of human rights over the unconstitutional animal rights laws, those are supposed to be held in a federal court with a jury trial. You're not getting that. We're not getting that. And it violates the Eighth Amendment. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Who is another man to punish, or a government official to punish you over the animals that you own? You own all God-given dominion over the animals. All of your ownership rights are yours. If what you're doing with your animals is not infringing on another human being's rights, why is the government taking your rights away from you? Is the purpose of the government to protect you and your rights, or is the purpose of the government to protect your animals from you, your property from you? And the Ninth Amendment. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Remember, the Constitution is written to protect the rights of the individual. The people is each individual, each person. It was Madison's attempt to ensure that the Bill of Rights was not seen as granting only those rights that were written into the Constitution, but any rights that were afforded, the God-given rights that were afforded to the people. They didn't simply, if they wasn't written down, that doesn't mean they don't exist. Your rights still are yours. And the 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Again, the people means each individual. Understand, the only honest purpose for forming any government is to protect the rights of the individual from the majority. The majority would form groups and alliances, such as these animal rights people. They're well-funded. They form groups, they form alliances, and then they attack the sovereignty of the individuals and our rights. And they take away what the more industrious have made for themselves and their families. Understand, the Founding Fathers, they were brilliant. They put a system of government in place with 3 branches. Each branch is supposed to protect the rights of the individual from the next branch. If Congress or the legislature, or even your state capital, your legislators, if they pass a law that is in violation of the Constitution, then your executive branch is supposed to say, no, that law is unconstitutional, it cannot be passed. It cannot be enforced. If it gets by both of those 2 branches, then the judicial branch is supposed to step in and say, no, that law is unconstitutional, it cannot exist. But they did something more, okay? They also put in state level, where the state government, according to the 10th Amendment, is equal to the federal government. Most people don't realize that. They're each sovereign governments. Each one's sovereign. If the federal government, and well, we'll cover it here in just a moment, more in depth, it is to secure our rights that we resort to government at all. We all have inherent rights, regardless of whether the nation's authority recognizes our rights or not. Again, brilliant. Our Founding Fathers. That was Thomas Jefferson. Understanding the threat of Agenda 21, the most dangerous, broad, sweeping, and pervasive threat to our rights, our freedoms, our liberties, our families, the Constitution, and America today is the communist agenda of the global elite that's called Agenda 21. It will impact every area of your life, your liberty, your pursuit of happiness, your property, and your freedoms, and the futures of your children and your grandchildren. Agenda 21 is now being called Agenda 2030. Agenda 21 is a 351-page document of suggested policies for local, state, and federal governments to institute. The problem is all of those policies are based on communism. It refers over to another document that's called the Biodiversity Assessment, which is 1,194 pages. You have to read these documents to really understand them. And when you do, you'll understand that this threat is a new world. It's a new world order concept, and it's meant to enslave every person on the face of the earth. It's a 100-year plan. That's why they call it 21. It's an agenda for the 21st century, a 100-year plan. As I just told you, Reagan warned about it back in 1964 with his Time for Choosing speech. These people that put this plan together, they plan long term. And you're going to actually see that it started long before that.
Sustainable development has become the popularized expression for Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is the 1992 United Nations Rio Declaration on the Environment and Development.
It is the agenda for the 21st century you're living in today. For a brave new world where everything that you cherish and held true will no longer exist.
Agenda 21 defines itself as a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations systems.
It also elevates nature above man. And it contains something called the precautionary principle, where basically you're guilty until you're proven innocent.
Sustainable development is the philosophy designed to bring human beings across the globe under the full control of a narrow human elite.
It's a 40-chapter document to basically control the world. It's based entirely on socialist control mechanisms.
Sustainable developers have designed a global movement coordinated through a global to local action plan to create world government in accordance with certain objectives. These objectives include an end to national sovereignty, the abolition of private property, the restructure of the family unit, and increasing limitations and restrictions on mobility and individual opportunity.
The green goal includes the listings of what's not sustainable. A couple of the examples include private property.
728 lists fossil fuels.
Golf courses and ski lodges are not.
Consumerism.
Irrigation is not sustainable.
Paved roads.
Commercial agriculture.
Herbicides, pesticides. Elsewhere, it lists farmlands, pastures, grazing of livestock.
And a family unit. The focus of sustainable development is the abolition of private property, societal undermining of the family, and abandonment of the constitutional protection of unalienable rights as described in the Declaration of Independence. You see, ICE is so silly, it has no chance of having any effect on our society. Well, I was wrong.
The United States and government's support for sustainable development, Agenda 21, is very clear. In 1992, while the Rio Conference was going on, George Bush, then president, was there where he executed the Agenda 21 protocols on behalf of the United States and brought it back to Washington, D.C. Within a year, Bill Clinton, by executive order, no congressional review, established the President's Council for Sustainable Development.
Understand that there are international corporations and select local businesses, even within the state of Oklahoma, that are forming public-private partnerships that are part of Agenda 21, and they're forming those even at your local level, at your local city and county governments, and they have full intent to take control of all natural resources, including your private property rights. They want to force the rural people off the rural lands.
It's a partnership between selected developers building this new world order and the government using the American taxpayer dollars in order to do it. This is a map of the Wildlands Project. To explain the map, the red are areas that are to be off limits to human beings. No resource development, no human activity. If you live there, you won't. The yellow areas are the areas for major control of all human activity. If you live there, you won't. The black areas, the black dots, are the smart growth zones. That's where human beings are to be stacked and packed in small living units along rail tracks. The smart growth program ultimately has jobs assigned and children cared for by the state.
Now, this is real. This is what's really going on. All of your animal welfare laws, animal cruelty laws are part of this agenda. If you think it's not going on in Oklahoma, then you need to find out about the Oklahoma Academy report, Will Falk. The most commonly cited definition of sustainability was offered in 1987 by the Brundtland Commission. This is the UN Agenda 21 plan. Understand, Gro Harman Brundtland was the vice president of the World Socialist Party. She's the one that chaired and authored the Brundtland Commission plan. The Brundtland Commission plan is the document that came out with Agenda 21. In Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Academy authored Oklahoma's Environment, Pursuing a Responsible Balance. It is a 208-page compilation of essays, opinions, and ideas given by their experts, covering sustainability issues, mostly in the context of gaining acceptance for sustainable development practices. Beth Schaefer Caniglia, she is an Oklahoma Sustainability Network board member. She is a consultant to the non-government organizations, the steering committee to the United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development. She states that many landowners resist the perceived slippery slope of conservation mandates and retreat behind constitutional takings provisions. In other words, it's your private property. You can't tell me what to do with my private property. Oh, well, you're retreating behind a protection. We're going to deprive you of that. She gives her advice to overcoming the long-standing sentiments regarding private property. Understand, when they talk about overcoming, what they're talking about is taking your rights away from you. This report goes on, says, unfortunately, education alone is not enough to overcome the adversarial character that often pervades discussions of private property rights and sustainable ecosystem management trade-offs. With the ownership of our lands, here in Oklahoma at least, in Nevada and some of these western states out here, it's in federal government, in the government's hands. With the ownership of our lands predominantly in the private sector, we can best foster sustainable ecosystem management by engaging our landowners in the process. Understand, ecosystem management is not a good term. In other words, it's your land, but we're going to tell you what you can do with it. Given that citizen landowners continue to be engaged in the comprehensive planning, understand they change the language of this Agenda 21 all the time. Comprehensive planning, more than any other citizen engagement opportunities, they should be the focus of our efforts to harmonize private property interests with sustainable land management. Understand, what they form, and they have public forums where they invite the public in, and then they use what's called the Delphi technique to convince the landowner to concede away your rights. And then those individuals that don't want to adhere to their suggestions, they want to use law enforcement officers to force you into their opinion. And who pulls Beth Schaefer strings? We see it right here. Comprehensive planning is all cited by the World Health Organization, the United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development, and Agenda 21. Understand, that's here in Oklahoma. And while you're out working, these people, their entire job is to go inside of our state legislature up there, along with animal rights organizations, and to try to dictate and tell your legislators what laws they should enact. And in many cases,
the Wildlands Project is a very well-funded effort to lock up as much as 50% of the United States in the wilderness. It is heavily promoted by most environmental, non-governmental organizations. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, helped create it in the mid-1980s to be the foundation of the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, which the IUCN wrote in 1982. The IUCN is an international group of over 1,000 NGO and government members.
Environmental groups have effectively created a public image as organizations caring for helpless species and protecting environments. This has allowed them to implement an agenda in America that, if fully exposed, would be opposed by the majority of the people. In fact, most people supporting these organizations are not aware of their long-term objective, even though it is no secret. Take a look at the Wildlands map. It defines where environmentalists want to take America in the very near future. The areas in red will be off-limits to humans. The areas in yellow represent buffer zones, where limited use is allowed primarily to travel to and from populated areas. The areas in green are where normal use by humans will be allowed. However, by the environmentalists' own admission, these normal use areas would be restricted. When this plan was first published in 1992, the author, Reed Noss, explained how their agenda would affect the human population. He stated,
Eventually, a wilderness network would dominate a region and thus would itself constitute the matrix, with human habitations being the islands. No one, not even the longtime opponents of the environmental movement, believed such a transforming agenda was possible. However, it is being implemented quickly through innocent-sounding programs that most Americans support. Wilderness areas, critical habitat for endangered species, wetlands, roadless areas, national heritage areas, and other restrictive programs are sold to the public as necessary to protect nature, or as assurance that Americans will always have a place to escape from the heavily populated cities. More inventive tools and programs, such as conservation easements, smart growth, open space, and greenlining, are being promoted as a way to control growth. What all these programs have in common is extinguishing the private property rights of American citizens and transferring the control of the property to elite land trusts or directly to the government.
Understand, the Communist Manifesto is exactly defined here. It's the destruction of and abolition of private property. The heavy, progressive, or graduated income tax. They're taking as much wealth from the American people as they possibly can. Abolition of all right of inheritance. Understand, even the reverse mortgages are part of this. Reverse mortgages. The landowner signs away their rights. Their children no longer inherit that land unless they can come up with a lump sum payment to pay the government back for it and get it and regain it. Your inheritance taxes. In other words, when the death tax, when someone dies, they can't leave their property to their kids. Why? Because in most cases, the kids cannot afford the taxes involved with the inheritance. Confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. And who is the government saying is a rebel today? Anybody that believes in the Constitution of the United States. And understand that if the government, under this precautionary principle, anyone that's accused of a crime is automatically perceived as guilty. And under the precautionary principle, they have to take your rights away from you as a precaution because you might do something wrong. Norman Dodd, back in 1954, he's a congressional investigator. He authored the Reese Commission report. Now, he reported to Congress that almost every non-government organization in America had been created for the purpose of instituting communism in America. This is back in 1954. You can research his report online or watch the interviews that he has done that have been uploaded to YouTube. His name is Norman Dodd. The non-government organizations, such as the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, the Humane Society of the United States, the Humane Society International, the World Wildlife Fund, the Humane Society, the Oklahoma Sustainability Network, all of these organizations and many, many more that are pretending to be do-good charities are really the state and local worker bees for the UN Agenda 21 plan, for this communist agenda. The bottom line up front for the UN Agenda 21 plan is to destroy private property rights, to move nature ahead of humans, to place animals and land, fish and fowl, the environment, above human lives. And in 2002, the Humane Society of the United States laid the foundation of the animals above human lives concepts with the criminalization of my industry, the gamecock industry. Because they destroyed our industry, they awarded chickens state constitutional protections. In other words, they lowered the status of every human being in the state of Oklahoma to the equivalent of a chicken. Remember, they didn't raise animals up, they reduced man down. The animal rights agenda is to attack and destroy our animal agriculture industries and our manufacturing industries. They do it using many different agencies of the government. The Environmental Protection Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Animal Welfare Act. They use strong-arm tactics from the EPA, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bureau of Land Management. We've all seen and heard about the Bundy situation in Nevada, Oregon. Understand, it's all connected back to Agenda 21. The USDA, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, the ASPCA, Humane Society, PETA, all of these other organizations, understand their full-time job is to deprive you of your rights. And these non-government organizations, in many cases, they write the bills. They write them. They take them to your legislator and sell your legislature or your legislator into proposing them and sponsoring them. Animals and livestock are property. Even your pets are private property. Horses, cattle, pig, goat, emus, llamas, chickens, fish, all species of animals, fish and fowl, raised for commercial and non-commercial interest by farmers and ranchers, all of these are private property. According to the courts and the Oklahoma Rights to Farm Law, livestock is property of the owner. The owner uses their property in the best interest of their family. Usually it's to earn a living and provide for their family. But it doesn't matter. Whatever you use your property for, your animals for, they're yours. You have all God-given dominion. And what do the animal protection laws do? They create a legal precedence. They make it illegal for you to own and possess your property if you intend to use your property, because the role of the government is to protect your property from you. Now, what is the goal of Agenda 21? To make it illegal to own and possess your property with the intent of using your property, because the government's role is to protect your property from you. In 2014, Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt issued a statewide fraud alert against the Humane Society of the United States. But yet, less than 2 years later, in 2016, the Humane Society of the United States is here in Oklahoma training and even promoting on their own website. They're training 700 law enforcement officers in Oklahoma on how to go out and enforce animal cruelty laws. In other words, how to violate your property rights. How to subjugate the people to beneath an animal. In May of 2016, they were training 350 law enforcement officers on how to deal with wild animals. In June, they were telling them, they were training their Humane Society coordinators in the state how to work with law enforcement officers, how to convince the law enforcement officers to violate your rights at the local level. The Council on Law Enforcement Education and Training, CLEAT, certifies these HSUS instructors to indoctrinate the law enforcement officers to attack our animal agriculture industries and destroy our human rights, to strip us of our property and our property rights. And it's all about instituting the communist UN Agenda 21 policies into laws and then putting those into common practice with the government agents and the agencies. But HSUS officers are not officers of the court. They have no real authority. The enforcement of animal welfare laws have government agents making raids, ripping families apart, and creating situations where government agents may kill American citizens, using the excuse that the government's duty is to defend animals from the Americans and own the animals. These unconstitutional laws are destroying human rights and moving animals above human lives, just as the Communist UN Agenda 21 plan calls for. And who profits? The same non-government organizations like the Humane Society that are instituting these laws and instituting these raids. But up under Title 18, United States Code Section 241, I want to know why our Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma is not prosecuting these people for violations of rights. If Title 18, Section 241 says if two or more persons conspire, that's act in a hidden agenda, conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person in any state in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured to him by the Constitution or laws of the United States, or because of his having so exercised those rights, or if two or more persons go in disguise on the highway or on the premises of another person with intent to prevent or hinder the free exercise and enjoyment of any rights protected by the Constitution, then that person shall be fined, or persons shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 10 years, or both. If death results, in other words, if they convince the law enforcement officers to make a raid, and during that raid the law enforcement officers kill a human being to protect an animal, then understand that that then becomes, if death results from the acts committed in violation of this section, or if they take a kidnapping. In other words, they come out and make a raid over an animal and they take your kids away from you because you're a bad person. You're abusing an animal, or you're not taking care of your animals. If they take your kids away from you, that's kidnapping. Even if the state does it, it's kidnapping. Because they had no authority to be there in the first place. And if they do that, that persons shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for any term of years, or for life, or both. Or maybe sentenced to death, and I hope they get that. The unconstitutional law criminalizing Oklahoma's gamecock industry, my industry, was brought about by acts of the Humane Society in violation of Title 18, Section 241 in 2002. So are the Humane Society of the United States members and officers like Cynthia Armstrong, Janet Halliburton, Wayne Purcell, John Paul Goodwin, Judge James Winchester, and Susan Winchester, are they above the law? Are they like Hillary Clinton, unprosecutable? Will Beth Schaefer and Will Folk ever get held accountable for the violations of human rights that they're trying to push? Does Title 18 United States Code Section 241 not apply to the communists that are pushing the UN Agenda 21 plan? Now we're going to get to what we've been discussing, we were wanting to talk about. State Question 777. The Right to Farm Act, Oklahoma legislators' Trojan horse. Understand, the Right to Farm Act carries hidden language to create a loophole for HSUS and their minions to continue attacking our animal-related industries. Oklahoma is a legislative petition state. Non-government organizations like the Humane Society use legislative petitions combined with emotionally based propaganda to manipulate the misguided urban majority, the voters, to destroy the property rights of the rural farmers and ranchers. It's estimated that 77% of the population lives in urban cities. Okay, that means only 23% of the people live out here in rural America. So our urban voters, they outnumber the rural people. Now, they use these legislative petitions like they did in Oregon, Florida, California, and Maine to pass laws like the gestation crates for pigs laws. They use the egg battery cages law in California, and these laws have forced the cost of eggs up in California to over $3.16 a dozen. Though these laws are intentionally designed to attack the small farmers and ranchers that cannot comply with the policies that are being instituted. And therefore, they destroy those smaller farmers. They leave in place the larger commercial farmers. The history and background of the bill, State Question 777 was first proposed for Oklahoma 2 years ago. Even back then, it was a Trojan horse. The bill stated, at that time stated, the right of Oklahoma farmers and ranchers to engage in all modern farming and ranching practices shall be forever protected, and it goes on, guaranteed in the state, etc. But the word modern is an identifier. And the Humane Society institute policies like that, and they carry this legislation to the legislators who enact it. And that identifier, just like this exact wording that they used in Ohio, as soon as that legislation is passed, then they step forward and say, oh, now you need somebody to tell you what the word modern means. You need an agriculture advisory board. By the way, we're the Humane Society. We've already put an agriculture advisory board together, and we'll perform that role, and we'll tell you what modern means. Now, the current language, the current flawed language reads, the right of citizens and lawful residents of Oklahoma to engage in farming and ranching practices shall be forever guaranteed in the state. The legislature shall pass no law which abridges the rights of the citizens and lawful residents. Again, an identifier. The legislature shall enact no law. Understand, by specifically stating the legislature shall enact no law, they've left it entirely open that the legislative petition and the voters can. So the majority can vote away the rights of the minority. That's not the constitutional republic. That's a socialist democracy. They cannot do it. They use costly policies, and some of it sounds good, because they implement these policies, and these costly policies end up driving up the cost of production, such as the gestation crates for pig laws. The farmers, they use those gestation crates to keep the pigs from, the sows from crushing the piglets. They use the egg battery cages. Out in California, with the egg production industry, you have to increase the size of your cages. Well, the small farmers that can't comply with any of these costly policies are driven out of business. And the veterinarian requirement for administering antibiotics, it's even going to stop the selling of medicated chicken feed that has been going on for 40 plus years. You'll no longer be able to buy that. Meanwhile, those small farmers and ranchers, you're not going to have to hire a veterinarian to give a shot to a cow or a pig or something that's sick. Small farmer and rancher can't afford that. So he can't comply. But these large corporate farms that are connected to Agenda 21 and these international corporations, they've got veterinarians on staff. They can absorb the cost. It's meant to drive the small farmers and ranchers out. Now, the federal court ruling, American Constitutional Law Foundation Incorporated versus Meyer in 1997, citing the Citizens Against Rent Control versus the City of Berkeley from 1981, says, voters may no more violate the United States Constitution by enacting a legislation than the legislature can by enacting a legislation, or a ballot issue than legislation. Every Oklahoman should remember the anti-Sharia law that was passed just a few years ago. Munir Awad versus Paul Zerax. The 10th Circuit said, when a law that voters wish to enact is likely unconstitutional, the public interests do not outweigh the rights of the individual in having his constitutional rights protected. So why is Oklahoma's constitutional law criminalizing gamecock industry not repealed? Because it is a foundation of Agenda 21. Again, the Supremacy Clause, Article 6, Section 2. The enforcement of any illegal law is an illegal act by the government, and you need to remember that. Because the duty of all honest government is to secure the rights of the individual. The 10th Amendment ensures that the states have a duty to stand against and stop the federal violations of the Constitution, in particular the Bill of Rights, to protect the rights of every individual. And many of our elected officials either do not understand their duty, or they need to find the courage to uphold their oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and Oklahoma. Has our government amended or repealed the 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, or 10th Amendments? No. So why are they violating them? Just as the duty of the federal government is to ensure and protect the state is not violating the Bill of Rights of the individual and subjugating the people within the state without proving a significant compelling governmental interest, it is also the duty of the state government to ensure that the federal government stays within the parameters of its duly authorized powers according to the U.S. Constitution. The state is to stand against the unconstitutional legislation and thus protects the individual freedoms and the Bill of Rights of the individual rights of Oklahomans. Understand, if the federal government passes an unconstitutional law, it's the state government's job to stand up and say, no, that law is unconstitutional. And we've all seen the state attorney general challenge many of the unconstitutional laws that have been enacted by the federal government. But understand, it's the same thing in reverse. If the state passes a law that's unconstitutional, it's the federal government's job to step in through the judiciary when the law is challenged to say, no, that law is unconstitutional, you cannot enact it. Because the state government and the federal government, both, the state, whenever they formed the union and joined the union, they agreed that they would adopt and abide by the United States Constitution as the supreme law of the land. The language to really protect our rights, to protect the agriculture as a vital sector of Oklahoma's economy, which provides food, energy, health benefits, and security, and is the foundation and stabilizing force of Oklahoma's economy. The right of Oklahomans to engage in farming and ranching practices shall be forever guaranteed in this state. This state shall pass no law abridging the rights of Oklahomans to employ agriculture technology, livestock production, and ranching practices, except to address and forward a significant and compelling governmental interest according to strict scrutiny standards of judicial review. All proposed legislation, laws, policies, county and city ordinances infringing on rights of Oklahomans to employ any farming and ranching practice must meet the same criteria as a judiciary review under strict scrutiny standards, proving a significant and compelling governmental interest. In support of protecting the rights of Oklahomans, any court challenge originating in Oklahoma as to contest a constitutional amendment, statute, law, county, or city ordinance on the basis of infringing on farming and ranching operations or private property rights must use strict scrutiny standards as relating to any minority group when evaluating the constitutional aspects and infringements of the challenged statute. If they will use that language for the legislation, it will, that I've suggested here, they would not be shirking and revoking their duty to enact laws when necessary, and they would not be prohibiting or stopping the legislative petition process from being used. But they would be giving and acknowledging that the rural farmers and ranchers and the rural people are a minority group, and we should have be protected as such.
Okay. You ready for question?
To evaluate your legislator, or your candidates for office, ask them one question: do animals have rights? Yeah. Because any legislator or candidate for office that says animals have rights, that legislator is attempting to remove your God-given rights from you.
If you all got questions, let me get the microphone over there to you so that we can get your questions in this record.
Remember, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and do not judge others.
First name.
Judge not, lest you be judged.
Yes, Bill, Mark Yates. Quick question, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying. The Humane Society of the United States is in Oklahoma, and they are driving their agenda, and they're associated with the Kirkpatrick Foundation, animal rights activist organization. Chris Cassee, who sits on Kirkpatrick's Foundation's board, also sits on the National Council of the Humane Society of the United States. The question I guess I would have for you is, they are opposed to State Question 777. They are fighting it actively in this state and dumping millions of dollars into billboards, and they're going to buy TV advertisements to not let this pass. And so my question is, are they not worried that if this does pass, they will no longer be able to push that agenda in Oklahoma?
Understand, the only reason they're against it is because it takes away their ability to go to a legislator and get laws enacted. They're still going to use the legislative petition process. And so They want.
can do that either way, correct?
Right, what they want is they want both venues and both avenues open to them.
Right.
They're afraid this is gonna close.
This cuts off one, because as Oklahoma does become more urban, the legislative body will be made up of urban legislators.
Right.
So,
And
okay.
so, but understand that they're still gonna push their agenda. I'm opposed to this legislation because the language of it is flawed. And I went to these legislators, I talked to several of these legislators and understand the truth. I told them this language is flawed. They actually used the strict scrutiny standards. That's language that I talked to and discussed with Eddie Fields, the senator. So he used it, but they didn't use the rest of the language. Yeah, they didn't use that.
It is going to be strict scrutiny because they.
Right.
Okay.
But the farm, how we find the Farm Bureau over that? I'm sorry, he heard me, because the Farm Bureau is obviously in favor of this, and they're statists, you know?
Well, the Farm Bureau, understand that, I went to some of their meetings also and discussed this with them. They simply see this as it's a good step. Oh, this is a good thing. It's going to protect the farmers and ranchers. In reality, it doesn't. In reality, it doesn't.
I agree.
So, you know, not to say that specifically that they're ignorant, but they're ignorant.
They are. They are. They may be well intentioned, but.
Any other question?
Ladies and gentlemen, understand that even the Yale law professor Stephen Carter, as you see it on the slide, do not support any law unless you personally approve the killing of a person to enforce that law. I used to teach use of force, security forces, law enforcement. Every time law enforcement officers go out and make any kind of a raid, of any kind, to enforce any law, they create a situation where they may hurt, cripple, or kill a human being. That is a fact you cannot get over. So now what we're doing, we're trying to empower our law enforcement officers to go out and make raids and potentially kill people to defend animals. And it's all being brought about on emotionally based ideologies, somebody's trying to force you and other Americans into a communist ideology.
There's another point I would bring up with Farm Bureau. Farm Bureau's an insurance company. I mean, you know, people, it's kind of false advertising, some of this. It's kind of like if you look at banking laws here, you know, they came up with all these banking laws that are supposed to help regulate the banks and all that. And basically what they do is they favor, these laws favor the large banks over community and small banks, because large banks have 250 lawyers. These regional banks are lucky to have one lawyer. And so it's a way of shutting those out. And ever since the banking regulations came in 2008, we've lost half of our community and town banks. This is the same thing you have here. I was running for a state senate, and we found out that the deputy campaign manager for my main opponent, who outspent us about 100 to 1, who's also his son, is also, he's one of the top 25 lobbyists in this state. We looked into who he lobbied for, and their main client was basically the Poultry Foundation. Now you look at the Poultry Foundation, that's a nice way of saying Tyson. I mean, a lot of this stuff is favoring big agribusiness over the small farms.
That's what I'm saying. It comes back to Agenda 21 and the international corporations that are tied to Agenda 21. They absolutely want to seize control of all food supplies.
That's right.
And that's part of this agenda. Any more questions?
Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Comment? Bob?
Yeah, my name's Bob. In your presentation, I agree with a lot of what you had to say, but I think you kind of skipped this part there where you have, as owner of animals, property, you have your own right to take care of that property and those animals. I don't think just because you're a horse farmer, I don't think you'd go out and kill your old horse simply kind of sit or kill your cows, you know. But I think you have a right to take care of them. You have an obligation to take care of them. So just
Okay, I guess that's all,
Well,
that's all the question.
understand that when you talk about the individual property rights, and you talk about the obligation to take care of them, it's just like the obligation, or your obligation to do anything. When you try to arbitrarily take over and use your emotions to dictate what another person can do or cannot do, then you're trying to institute your emotions into laws. You're trying to force your emotions into legislation. And when you start trying to enforce emotionally based legislation, you're creating situations where you may have another person killed over your emotional argument. So you're in truth, what you're doing is you're putting that animal and your opinion, your emotionally based opinion, above that other human being's, not just their rights, but their life.
Okay, my name is Johnny, and I just want to get something clear that I'm not. The Kirkpatrick Foundation is against 777, right? Yeah. Am I right?
Right.
Yeah.
And you're for it?
No.
No, you're not for it. You're against it also.
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, you're on.
I'm against the language that they use.
Of what they're using. Okay, that's what I'm getting at. Because for one, like I think for Bob, there's a difference between animal welfare and animal rights. Having worked again and fought against several of the things that, the wildlife departments and different ones, again, I don't trust the Humane Society with anything because of what they've done, but they do play off of the emotions. So I just want to get sure I'm on the same level or where you're coming. You're against that too, the 777 bill is the way it's written.
I'm against the language that they use because understand, I was raised with people that were farmers and ranchers and practiced common sense, and they always said, do it right the first time. And our legislators are not.
I'm Scott. The question I have is, the way the bill is written right now to vote for it, you vote yes to keep it, no to keep it, or what? How is it, are they going to have it on the ballot?
It simply says, do you want to enact it? Yes. Which will you vote yes for it, or do you reject it? No.
So the vote then should be no.
Yeah, but that's what I'm going to vote. You get to make your own choice.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Don, who's the principal supporter of this?
But understand that where it's going back to your animal welfare laws, even then, even your animal welfare laws are unconstitutional. Because your animals are your property. You have total dominion over your animals. Your house, you're the king of your castle. No other man can step in and say, hey, we're going to remove your kingdom from you because the animals are more important and I don't like the way you're doing what you're doing. They don't have that authority.
I'd like to clarify a point. My name is Jim. The way the concept works with the Animal Welfare Act is that the animal welfare, or any of their agents, whether it's ASPCA or Humane Society or PAWS, PETA, whatever, and there are many of them, when they come and make an accusation, they come with their own investigation. They are not law enforcement. They're a private business, an NGO. That means a non-governmental organization, or what we sometimes refer to as 501c3 corporations. It's privately incorporated, it's an inheritable asset, private business. A private business is not supposed to be allowed by the Constitution to arrest anyone, so they have to go to the police with an investigation. They make an accusation that you're not taking care of your animals. They go in, and who inspects them? Your animals. The Humane Society. They inspect it and say, oh, terrible. They're infected with parasites, there's no water, there's no feed. Not considering that feeding a dog once a day is good management. And not considering that your dog sometimes drink out of a toilet, but the water's not clean. They come up with all these little claims and they bring charges against you and take your animals. You can sign away your animals or you're going to go to court. Most people that they choose and pick on to enforce the building of case law are people who cannot defend themselves. That's how it's being enacted.
To point out a prime example of that, there was a lady down in Texas that I was helping. They come out and made a raid and took her cattle from her and her horses. Now understand the justification. The Humane Society made the complaint. The Humane Society got the law enforcement officers to come and make the raid. The Humane Society was giving her animals. And so they profited from her loss. They sold the animals. But the justification for taking our animals away from her, because she had a 250-gallon stock tank, and they said that the water in the stock tank was dirty, and it had to be changed every day. Now, how many of you go out and change the pond water every day? The horses would drink out of pond, and they drink out of a stock tank. But they took our animals because they were drinking out of a stock tank, and the water had to be changed every day.
One more question. One more question. We're running out of time.
Yeah, well, I'm done. The title of the bill, Right to Farm. It seems to me that it's going to be extremely difficult to get people to vote no, just because of the title. And obviously that was a game when they made that title.
Correct.
That's just a comment. Another comment is on your presentation, and I thank you very much for being here. You've done a lot of research. But I think if you could put up the bill to begin with and have a little bit of a discussion on that, and then maybe condense the rest of your research. And you've done so much research, and I appreciate that. But I've kind of lost, I was going in and out of interest. You can probably see me dozing at times. But anyway, thank you very much. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
All right, now stand adjourned.
Well, I would